you've transitioned from training with the national team, and now you're working on a new project, which we're going to talk about shortly. Is that it provides you with this amazing perspective, like you said, of where you've come from, what you've experienced, and now asking that question of how you can give back and what that can look like in action. And I think a lot of people would be interested to hear about your project. So I know it's been a weird summer and a challenging time with COVID-19, but what have you been up to, and what have you and your team been up to this summer?
Sure. So over the winter, I decided that I wasn't coming back to training camp, and it was time to take the next step. I had been talking with other paddlers in Manitoba, namely Mohammed Crossman-Serb and Tristan Schneider. And we'd all kind of thought how amazing, bringing that context back and creating those opportunities for Indigenous youth to reconnect with paddling and promote health and wellness along the way. We were contacted by Southeast Child and Family Services to do programs for their youth in care and the other kids within their communities. So we set out, we hired 8 people during a pandemic, trained them in Canoe Kids, and deployed them to these communities in southern Manitoba, mostly within Treaty 5 territory, which is in the Canadian boreal forest. And we ran canoe programs with the kids. I was there in 3 communities. We had about 20 kids showing up every day. And you see the transformation from day one into the final days, especially going into the second week of these kids, most of them who are in care, have, really troubling lives, family situations. And they just come canoeing and be a kid again, but also get that cultural component, which even though many people would expect living on reserve, that cultural piece is there, but that's very much not the case in many reserves, in Manitoba at least. Kids just simply don't know their language, they don't know their culture. A really powerful moment for me this summer was we had an elder come in to talk to the kids about some sacred rock that was in a community. And there was about 20 kids that came on this hike. And when he was all done talking, he said, "So how many of you know who you are? And no one lifts their hands. And he's like, "Okay, but how many of you know you're Anishinaabe," which is the people they were. 3 or 4 kids put up their hands. You could just see in that moment that was like kind of the first piece of them being able to put together the puzzle of being an Indigenous person and trying to figure out your identity and work through all these different systems that are against you. And we just so strongly believe that paddling, as funny as it seems, is just like kind of that support system, that it's physical activity and it's all culture, it can be language and all these things intertwined. And that just makes a supportive net, especially for youth. So in every community we're in this year, we ran a Canoe Kids workshop and taught community members how to coach canoeing. So next time we're there, we can hire community members instead of sending people up, and build that capacity in the community and support the youth and make it a holistic health picture. And it just so happens that canoeing is just an amazing vehicle to do that.
You mentioned, the difference your programming is making, and where you see it can make a difference. And what's it like for you and the other leaders and coaches to watch the program have an effect? How do you see that change for the participants in your program?
It's really awesome to see the change, and it's kind of different for each kid. So a lot of that is when we're coming in on a Monday and we're starting a program in the afternoon. A lot of the kids are coming in shy, And a lot of these communities we're in, most of the teachers are like flown in from Newfoundland. So they're like not from the community. Same thing with like all the other people in positions of power, so the police and like the principal, etc. So when they see people like me, they kind of assume, that I'm there in a position of power, or I'm, there to punish them or whatnot. So I was very fortunate to do my programming with Lauren Evans, who is from Cross Lake, Manitoba. She's Cree and visibly Indigenous. And so she could really get on a different level with the kids that maybe were initially intimidated or scared by my tall, blue-eyed presence. So from our last program, I did 2 weeks in Little Grand Rapid, and we went from people that wouldn't even come close or talk to us to at the end wanting to give us hugs, and obviously because of COVID that wasn't happening, but so just seeing that open up and knowing that we created this safe space for those 2 weeks where they got to experience some of their culture, got to hear a bit of the language and stuff that they don't normally have access to. There's something within canoeing that I know it and I feel it. It's hard to explain, but that's been the transformative experience in just 2 weeks or a week of programming.
That's great. Finally, James, thinking about Waterways and it's year one, if I'm correct, of you working in Manitoba, and I know you're working with a bunch of partners, bunch of communities, and have a bunch of amazing staff and alumni from within CKC, and then other paddlers and other people from other streams of the sport community. So just looking ahead, like I'd like to hear more about Waterways and what your vision is, and kind of where you see this project going.
Sure. And I probably should mention that Waterways this season has partnered with the Manitoba Paddling Association to work on some of these projects in different capacities. But in long term, what we're really hoping Waterways can just expand, and I'm talking about paddling, but there's so much more activities and things that can be integrated so easily into kind of this land-based recreation or sport that bring those benefits that I was talking about with that paddling does, whether that's going out and canoeing and being immersed in the language and developing fluency within youth and adults, but it also could be building canoes, building York boats, and having that aspect as well. It's hands-on experience, but experiencing the culture and often the languages too. We are super inspired by Ganawage and the club there on Managi. They're just so amazing, and so we try and draw inspiration from what they've been doing. So we're just looking forward to what's around the corner and making sure that there's more positive experiences and doing it from a community-based approach.
That's great, James, and I look forward to continuing the conversation and working together and walking the road together and growing together. So thanks a lot for your time, and best of luck with the rest of this year.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.